Welcome to another episode of Coffee with April. I'm in the middle of practice, more specifically a practice for the World Brewers Championship in Boston. And this will be kind of another rant where I will tell everyone why I think everyone should compete. I think competing in coffee is to some degree pretty much misunderstood, in the sense that I think some people are not competing because they look at it from a perspective that I don't necessarily agree with. I think competing, the foundation of that is getting better. That's really what it is. Competing in itself, meaning the kind of 10 minutes you spend on stage for the open service, for example, is that's one thing, and the experience you get with that and the difficulties that comes with that as well. But the focus here is the amount of hours you put into practice. Hopefully practicing smart, hopefully practicing with people around you that are better than you, hopefully experiencing some really great coffees and becoming a better brewer on the context of the World Brewers Championship. And I mean, this is true for all competitions, whether that would be cup tasting, latte art, e-brick, or barista, whatever you're competing in with, right? So I feel a lot of people are not competing because of those 10 minutes. And I understand that some people have, difficulty with nervousness, difficulties with a lot of different things. I would say that most people make a decision not to compete based on who they are and how they feel right now at this point. And I think they're forgetting that training is about becoming better. So let's say you're deciding to compete 6 months from now in your national championship, then the version of you going up competing in that competition is not who you are now, it's who you're going to be 6 months from now. So the training is to be structured and done in a way so that you are comfortable going up on stage in 6 months. And I mean, to be fair, if you properly dedicated yourself to something over 6 months, there's very few things in life that you can't actually fix or that you can't actually get better at. The challenge is that people don't properly dedicate themselves to do something. And of course the process needs to be right, but again, I mean, it's really not that difficult. It requires time, practice, and dedication. And again, you can practice smart on different levels. Some people practice a lot without practicing smart, gaining very little from it. Some people compete year after year after year, basically doing the same thing. I think that's probably not a recipe for success as well. I think it's important to, every time you go up, you actually go up with something new, not in the sense that you're reinventing the wheel, not in the sense that you're reinventing yourself every single time. A lot of the times, which is true for me as well, looking at me competing in Brazil and now in Boston, what I'm doing in Boston is definitely a version of what I did in Brazil. So it's the kind of fundamentals and basics that I established during my training for Brazil, and then I just made sure to make those better, to hopefully score better now in Boston, right? So I mean, it has to be a process. But then again, I mean, I still argue that the most valuable thing I've ever done in coffee in terms of getting better and learning, and I've done a fair amount of different things now, is competing in the World Championships, because the practice that comes with that, the level you need to be at, the difficulties that comes from it, and how much you need to kind of push yourself in order to perform well, which is something I'm still waiting to do, because technically I haven't done that. I mean, it's really what's going to push you up and make you better. That's why you keep on exposing yourself to it. I mean, it is a stress factor. It is something that is taking away dedication and effort from other projects, for example. I mean, I'm running a company, doing different things as well, and competing is taking up a big portion of my time right here, right now. And let's be honest, unless you win in the World Championship, my business is not going to benefit from the time that I put in now. However, personally, I am going to benefit from it. Personally, it doesn't matter if I go into Boston and crash and burn, or if I win. The result and the outcome will be the same, as in I've learned something new and I've pushed myself moving forward. So the result in the end of the day doesn't really matter, even though we practice to win in that sense, right? So it's It's a kind of two perspective kind of thing, but in the end of the day, it's about you becoming better at something, right? And there's very few times, both I feel professionally and also privately, unless you're, let's say, involved in sports on a very high level, where you actually get a situation where you can push forward and where you actually can benchmark yourself properly to other professionals, because that's really what it's about. It's about going up there, showing the judges and everyone else, this is where I am right now. This is the quality I have. This is the coffees I like. This is the brew methods I have, and this is how I'm approaching things. And that's really the key thing, right? Showcasing that ability to do something. And then hopefully you're gonna progress and do better from that. It's not necessarily about, changing everything, because I don't believe it will. However, I continue to believe that the people that are not competing, and again, I respect the fact that it's not for everyone. I respect the fact that compete. Some people are more nervous than others. When I started out competing, or when I started out doing presentations, I was nervous as fuck. My face would turn completely red. I would be shaking like a fucking leaf. And the only way to move away from that is to do it continuously, not just doing it continuously, but also practicing and getting better in between. And you realize very quickly that everything you do is basically pouring a bit of water on some coffee and talking in front of three very nice people that are there to help you. As in, we're not changing the world. This is not the most difficult thing one can do. So you need to put it in perspective, and you need to realize that there's an opportunity to learn and get stronger as a professional in what you're doing. And I think competing is a great way to do that. Is competing the only way to do that? No, of course. But I'm going to bet you that the people that are competing in the World Championships are spending more time than you are training at getting better at coffee, searching for green coffees, getting better at presenting, getting a better network than you do, and a lot of other things. And it's fine if you're in a position where you can gain that outside of a competition. I think that's amazing. But let's face it, most people that are not competing or at least have that amount of practice that would go into competing are not going to be as good as the ones that are. It's pretty simple, right? So again, it's not necessarily, you don't have to compete to become really good at something, but you have to practice, you have to train, you have to get better. You need to put the hours in of doing something to properly master that skill. And competing is a great way to evaluate where you are on that path. Whereas if you don't compete, it's harder for you to actually understand where you are. And then people argue, well, competing in the World Brewers is just about bringing geishas, it's just about bringing super expensive coffees, which is the truth with moderation. Competing is about bringing the best tasting coffee you can find. If that's a geisha, then bring a geisha. If it's not a geisha, then don't bring a geisha. I think we've seen, Emmy very clearly last year showed the whole world that, you can win with a Brazilian coffee, which I think up until then, a lot of people didn't necessarily think was possible. We had Michaela doing very well a few years ago with the Kenyan coffee, washed, processed. There are definitely exceptions and examples of people doing extremely well with brew methods and coffees that we didn't necessarily think would be able to do that. But they're able to do that because they're mastering their skill and they put the practice in and they work with people that are better, and then they become better, right? So competing is not just about that. Or if that's the only thing you can take away from competing while looking at it, you're in the wrong spot anyway, because then you're missing out the important thing here. The important thing here is training, getting better, and there's a lot more things going on to it than just having a really fancy, delicious green coffee, because you need to deliver a delicious cup of coffee on a very specific day, on a very specific time. Anyone can brew a delicious cup of coffee, back home in your coffee shop, in your roastery at home, because you have a shitload of training, time to just do it. You have a lot of, you're comfortable where you are. You can have 100 batches of your coffee, but competing is about mastering your skill on the level where you're able to do this on a very specific time, right? They're giving you a time slot. You have 10 minutes, go and do this. And you need to be awesome at that single time. And there's no way around that, which is it's what makes it really difficult and challenging, and also very, very interesting, right? Everyone competing in the worlds are very good at what they do. There's no discussions about that, but the top ones are the ones that can bring their A game on a specific time, on a specific day, and you can only do that with practice. That's not a random thing. So, and not to rant too long here, but I mean, if you want to get better at something, competing in it is going to help. And I mean, stop looking at competing as this huge giant step where only a few people can take and enter, because it's not. I mean, you just start with where you are right now. And I mean, keep in mind, unless you win, no one really cares, honestly. I mean, a lot of people think that if I compete and do badly, then people are going to look at me and think they're not good. That's not true. People are going to look at you and be like, wow, you competed. That's really cool. Well, most other people did not compete, right? So competing and losing is always going to be better than not competing, right? And I think that's something we often lose track on. I think I'm going to argue that most of the times people don't compete because they're afraid of someone else saying that they're not good enough. They're afraid of sitting backstage with the judges, hearing a very honest review of where they are at this moment. And some people have a very hard time taking in critique that is not necessarily always positive, even though it's always constructive, right? It's there to actually make you improve and become better. But I just think it's unnecessary to let that kind of hold back, because that's a big part of it. And I can't really look at my time competing and say that there's anything negative that has ever came out of that. Apart from, sure, a bit of stress in the beginning where I wasn't very comfortable competing. In my first competitions, I realized that was not, I did really shit because I wasn't comfortable doing it. And sure, there's a bit of stress that goes into that, but apart from that, there's really nothing negative. It's only positive stuff, regardless of winning, not winning. Especially competing in a world championship is probably the best way to just push yourself forward, because you're in a room backstage with some of the best in your industry, and you're learning, you're experiencing, you're talking, and you get really motivated, because we're at a point in coffee now where like proper craftsmanship or proper skill it's not really there anymore, because you're a coffee roaster, you roast your coffee for 6 months, and now you're a roasting master, or you're a barista, you brewed coffee for like a year, and now you're a master in that as well. There's very few other crafts, like proper crafts in this world that anyone would consider anyone to be good after doing it for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, even 5 years, right? Whereas coffee is this kind of lazy ass industry where we're super good at what we do directly by day one, especially if we have fancy equipment. And that's not necessarily the way that I'm looking at it. It takes practice, it takes time. I'm still working very hard on becoming as good as I want to, and I only have a few more years left in coffee before it's time for me to do something else, and I'm going to do my best to become as good as I can during the time I'm here. And a big part of that is working continuously with other people. There's so many people that are better doing things, especially from a competition format, than I am. And then if I want to get better, I put myself in the same room as they are, and I listen to them. And I listen to the critique, and I expose myself to critique, and then you push yourself forward, right? Can never get better at anything if you think you're already good at it, right? That's like the key point. Just drop that and realize that if you want to get better, like really getting better, then you need to be around people that will make you better on not just a yearly basis. You need to do that on a daily basis. Otherwise, you're not gonna go anywhere. We're a bit off topic here now, but I mean, let's bring it back together. I mean, just compete. It's really not that, maybe it's a bit nerve-wracking the first time. The second time it won't be, because you've already been through it. Give yourself a break. I mean, you're not gonna save the world by winning anything. You're not gonna change the world by winning anything. Winning is just a result of you practicing and doing something. Winning is not necessarily gonna change anything unless you change something afterwards, right? So do it because you're gonna get better. that's really the one reason why you should do it. With that, I'm not going to talk for longer. I feel pretty much done here now. If you guys have any questions, thoughts on competing, write them down here. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a home barista or professional versus non-professional, working coffee for 5 days or 5 years. Just jump in and compete. You're going to be way better than we were before. And then what you do with that and whatever result you get, I mean, you take that on to the next year and you compete again, and you're going to realize that, I mean, you're going to be a lot better, a lot quicker than if you didn't do it. Thank you guys.